Okay, imagine for a second that we could actually build a blueprint for real endless happiness, a constructible heaven, if you will. And we're not talking about magic or the supernatural here, but building it through rigorous science, psychology, and logic. To pull this off, we have to start by completely rejecting the whole concept of infinity and instead embrace a minimal computational rule that builds the universe, our consciousness, and literally all of our experiences right from the ground up. Today in this explainer, we are going to build what the author calls the Cathedral of Cause and Experience.
So here's how we're going to lay out this architectural blueprint today. First, the blueprint of reality. Then, the scale of the finite, followed by the spark of experience. After that, we'll look at the trap of habituation. And finally, constructing an infinite future. Let's dive right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the blueprint of reality. To build our metaphorical cathedral, we obviously need a rock-solid foundation. And that actually starts with a pretty bold refusal.
We really have to look at the stark contrast between these two views of the universe. You know, in physics and philosophy, it's super tempting to lean on completed infinities, like a multiverse, where literally everything that can happen does happen, all at exactly the same time. But think about it. If everything exists simultaneously, it's completely static. Causality blurs. It actually explains nothing at all. Instead, we are looking at finitism. This is a universe that is causal and step by step. The past is finite, but the future is wide open. It's a reality where potential complexity is never truly finished, which gives us perfectly reliable cause and effect.
So, how does a finite universe actually kick off? Well, the source material points out that reality undeniably exists from what you could basically call a magical, illogical origin point, just a void bursting into a single point. But from that very first moment, the magic completely stops. From there, the universe is driven entirely by a Wolfram-style single rule. This is a minimal computational principle that just repeats over and over and over again on a discrete structure, kind of like a grid of distinct separate pixels. It takes its own output and uses it as its new input. This endless, step-by-step cascade is what creates space, time, and causality. It locks out all the magic from the subsequent steps, giving us a perfectly reliable, logical universe.
Moving to Section 2, the scale of the finite. Now, just because we are rejecting infinity absolutely does not mean our universe is small or limited.
To really wrap our heads around this, we gotta ground ourselves, because human intuition completely breaks down when we start dealing with massive numbers. Look at this timeline. 1 billion seconds? That's about 31.7 years. A pretty good chunk of a human life, right? A trillion seconds? That takes us back 31,700 years. We're talking way before the last ice age. But the mathematical numbers required to build our universe reduce a trillion to a microscopic rounding error.
And this brilliantly illustrates the explosive, mind-bending power of finite math. It's perfectly captured by something called the fast-growing hierarchy. Step 1 is literally just simple addition. Step 2 introduces exponential growth, giving us a small number, like 24. But then, boom, by step 3, we are dealing with a tower of powers, resulting in a number with 100 million digits. And the hierarchy just keeps going, taking these incredibly massive numbers and using them as the mere index for the next calculation.
And it just spirals from there, culminating in numbers like tree 3. This is an exactly defined, finite number, derived from a simple game of drawing networks of points and lines, yet it soars so incredibly far above standard exponential notation that it completely defies human comprehension. Or take the uncomputable Busy Beaver function, which calculates the maximum lifespan of simple computer programs. The profound takeaway here is that a finite, causal universe, driven by one simple rule, can generate absolute, endless complexity. You simply don't need the mysticism of infinity to gaze upon something truly sublime.
All right, Section 3, the spark of experience. We've got our physics sorted out, now let's pivot and see how this builds into biology and consciousness. This naturally forces us to ask a really provocative question. Where exactly does experience begin? Like, how does a cold, calculating mathematical rule crossing millions of complex nodes suddenly cross a threshold and create the actual subjective feeling of being alive?
Well, the explainer points to integrated information theory, or IIT. The core metric of IIT is this concept of phi.
Basically, phi measures the degree to which a system's causal structure forms an irreducible unified whole. Think about it. You can't just detach the experience of the shape of a rose from the color red, right? It's integrated. According to this model, consciousness is definitely not an illusion. It is absolutely identical to a local, maximally integrated causal structure in the universe. To put that in perspective, look at this evolutionary comparison. For an early organism, the phi level is super low. The experience is just a faint spark. Remember, evolution didn't design us to be happy. It designed us to survive. So for early life, suffering was basically just an inevitable evolutionary shadow, a crude alarm bell for survival. But jump to the modern human brain, phi is off the charts. It's a literal galaxy of interdependence, giving us deeply varied valence, meaning we can feel everything from intricate sorrow to profound joy, and everything in between. Which brings us to Section 4, the trap of habituation. We are built to adapt, sure, but in the modern world, this incredible psychological survival tool can actually become our greatest enemy.
The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who actually survived the absolute horrors of Auschwitz, noted this incredibly dark truth. He said an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. Humans are just miraculously adaptable. We have this hedonic treadmill that constantly pulls us back to a baseline level of emotion. Frankl literally saw prisoners construct new coordinates of normality, finding dark pragmatism even in hellish conditions.
But here's the crucial catch. Habituation actually becomes collaboration when happiness numbs us to an unjust reality. Because we can adapt to almost anything, we often get used to incredibly toxic situations, a soul-crushing 60-hour workweek, an emotionally abusive relationship, or even a dystopian surveillance state. The rare, small moments of pleasure in those scenarios provide a numbing happiness that basically forces us to betray ourselves. We get so used to the heat, we don't even realize we're letting ourselves boil alive.
So we really need to differentiate between these two ancient Greek concepts. Hedone is that fleeting pleasure. It's that toxic habituation where you just accept bad, oppressive conditions for the sake of comfort. But eudaimonia? That's authentic flourishing. It takes autonomy, real connection, and the courage to practice what the author calls critical habituation. Basically, this means you are routinely questioning your comfort zones and breaking uncomfortable habits to ensure the happiness you feel isn't costing you your soul.
And finally, Section 5, Constructing an Infinite Future. This is the climax of our explainer. We're now ready to build the vault of our cathedral by synthesizing the physics of the single rule, the consciousness of phi, and the psychology of habituation.
Think about this paradox for a second. Repetition causes boredom, but familiarity deepens experience. That is how we escape the hedonic treadmill. Repeating the exact same thing over and over is a total snooze fest. But deeply familiarizing yourself with complex, evolving patterns, that never gets old. It's like listening to a brilliantly composed symphony. Every single time you hear it, your capacity for integration grows, and you catch new, beautiful nuances. In a universe driven by a complexity-producing rule, novelty never has to run out.
So this gives us a totally actionable path forward. To achieve what the author calls open-ended safety, we must eradicate threats through science and cooperation, just like humanity literally wiped smallpox from existence. By doing that, we absorb the random deterministic blows of the universe, which actually expands our own internal free will. Then we attune ourselves to complex, familiar patterns that never bore us. Step by step, we just stack harmonious, integrated experiences limitlessly. Heaven, therefore, isn't some magical realm in the clouds. It is a highly constructible reality of stacking complexity that we build ourselves.
So I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. What have you become accustomed to just to achieve your current happiness? Are you settling for that numbing, toxic comfort? Or are you going to use your understanding of reality to break those habits and actively construct a better, infinite future? The universe gave us a reliable rule. What we build with it is entirely up to us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning your coordinates of normality.